During the 19th century, despite societal expectations on women to only write children's literature and poetry, the formidable Canadian novelist L.M. Montgomery emerged. Undeterred by the numerous tragedies she faced, she persevered and published her first of many novels at the age of 34. Anne of Green Gables proved to be an immediate triumph, capturing readers' attention and support from all over the world. Montgomery struggled with depression throughout her life, but she never stopped writing. She broke through social barriers and emotional setbacks in order to become one of the most influential authors of her era. Her books are still widely read and are a source of hope and inspiration to many. In the 19th century, literature was becoming increasingly diverse, and for the first time, women writers were publishing and gaining recognition. Despite the growing number of educated women, independence was difficult to achieve. Women were considered to have inferior writing skills and were told they were best suited to only write children's literature and poetry. Lucy Maud Montgomery, later known as L.M. Montgomery or simply Maud, was born on November 30th, 1874 in Clifton, Prince Edward Island. When she was just 21 months old, her mother tragically died of tuberculosis. Her father, Hugh, struggled with the death. He deeply grieved the loss of his wife and had trouble supporting his daughter financially. Amidst this struggle, he left Montgomery in the care of her maternal grandparents, the McNeils, who lived in Cavendish, PEI. Her grandparents showed little affection, and she felt loved only by her father, who moved to Saskatchewan when she was 7. Montgomery hid her disappointment and anger and continued to grow up under the care of her maternal grandparents. The lack of companionship in her life meant she found friends in the form of her imagination, books, and writing. She was an early reader, and at 9, Montgomery was writing poetry and recording journal entries. Montgomery always wanted to write a novel, but so far had only written short stories, serials, and poems. She kept a notebook full of ideas that she had for plots, characters, descriptions, and incidents. In the spring of 1904, she came across an old entry she had written years ago. Elderly couple apply to orphan asylum for a boy. By mistake, a girl is sent to them. She liked this idea and began drafting the book. She included incidents that had actually happened in her life, as well as parts of her cherished town, Cavendish. Cavendish was the inspiration of many of the natural landforms in Anne. Montgomery wrote the novel by hand, then typed it up on her old, dysfunctioning typewriter. She sent the manuscript to many different printing firms. Every one of them rejected it. Heartbroken, she placed Anne of Green Gables in an old hat box in the closed room, resolving to take it out again when she had time. On a winter day a year or two later, Montgomery was looking through her hat box, reading bits and pieces of her writing, when she came across the manuscript Anne. She decided to try again and sent it out to publishers for a second time. Several months later, she received an acceptance letter from L.C. Page & Company. The contract she signed required her to publish all of her books for the next 5 years with L.C. Page & Company. It also committed her to write sequels and publish under the name of Lucy Maud Montgomery. She refused because she had never liked the name Lucy. Instead, she pushed to publish under the name of L.M. Montgomery. For the book, Montgomery was given a choice of 2 different payment options. She could either accept an immediate payment of $500 or make a 10% royalty off every book. The royalty plan was riskier, as the book was not guaranteed to sell well. Montgomery chose to take a chance and agreed to the insufficient pay of 9 cents per copy sold. This decision was ultimately a good one. 6 months after the publication, she had earned more than 3 times what the outright payment would have ever been. Montgomery could have never imagined the response she got from her book. After the publication, success was immediate and dazzling, as Liz Rosenberg wrote in her biography, House of Dreams. 10 days after the publication in June of 1908, the book went into its second edition. After 6 months, the book had gone through 6 editions with nearly 20,000 copies purchased. The publication of Anne of Green Gables was the turning point in Montgomery's career. Almost overnight, she went from an aspiring novelist to renown throughout the world. Before the official publication of Anne of Green Gables, Montgomery had already started the sequel. After the triumph of her first book, many fans were excited for the following ones. 1 year later, in 1909, Anne of Avonlea was published. Over the next 2 years, she also published Kilmeny of the Orchard and The Story Girl. With the success of her books, she should have been happy. Montgomery was world famous, but her ailing grandmother prevented her from leaving the house. She suffered from seasonal depression and told her pen pal George Macmillan that she was sick of Anne. Montgomery was stressed and dreading her move away from PEI with her future husband, Ewan MacDonald. He was counting on her arrival in Ontario as soon as he began to establish a ministry. All these stresses led to poor mental health and several near-total collapses after 1908. Her mental health struggles lead historians to believe that she suffered from manic depression. Montgomery continued to write and was growing more and more financially stable, but she was struggling internally. Only 8 years into her marriage to MacDonald, a nervous breakdown made it clear he suffered from severe mental illness. Throughout his life, he continued to struggle and had significant trouble maintaining composure in public. This placed an additional burden on Montgomery, as she was now in charge of his medication and had to work in order for him to appear stable. In the throes of her personal turmoil, she felt pressure to keep writing only happy, joyous books like Anne of Green Gables. Montgomery refused her husband's wish for her to change her published name to Mrs. MacDonald, especially as she suspected he had never read a word of her writing. Although MacDonald recognized his wife as a writer, she was still expected to be in charge of keeping the house and maintaining the role of a typical minister's wife. Ironically, her income was what made it possible for them to keep their household running. Montgomery's hard and fast success following the publication of her books is evident through magazines, newspapers, and fan letters. She was featured in the September 1909 issue of The Book News Monthly, a magazine that advertised new and popular books. Her advertisement was in the front advertising section, which was one of the most expensive spots. The Book News Monthly was an American firm, showing evidence of her global popularity. Anne of Green Gables has been translated into more than 36 languages, including Braille, all over the world. It has been adapted more than 24 times into musicals, TV shows, Hollywood features, and movies. All of Montgomery's novels are still in print and are widely read and used for scholarly purposes.
We're getting a little boy from an orphanage in Nova Scotia.
My name is Anne Shirley. Anne spelled with me.
L. M. Montgomery died in Toronto in 1942, supposedly of heart failure. However, in 2008, on the 100th anniversary of the publication of Anne, Montgomery's family confessed that her death was likely a suicide by drug overdose. Stuart MacDonald, her youngest son, had found a note by her bedside, which they believe is her suicide note. His daughter, Kate MacDonald Butler, published an essay in the Globe and Mail, saying that, although she was a very successful author, her life was overshadowed by her depression, coping with her husband's mental illness, and the restrictions of her life as a clergyman's wife and mother in an era when women's roles were highly defined. Today, Montgomery is remembered for her beautifully poetic novels, charming poetry, and satisfying short stories. In order to continuously honor her work, websites and organizations have been established, and anyone is able to gain insight into her personal struggles and achievements through her journals. Prince Edward Island remembers her through their official provincial hymn, as they kept her original lyrics to the song. Places Montgomery lived in or used as inspiration for her novels have been turned into museums and heritage sites, so her legacy lives on. Lucy Maud Montgomery is important to us today because she paved the rocky path of literature for girls, women, and others all over the world. She broke through societal limits placed on women and her mental health struggles to become an influential and successful novelist. Her spirit will never be forgotten.